Hi, good afternoon. First off, I want to start out by thanking Mike, wherever he is, for bringing me in and allowing me to, as I've realized, as I've listened to all these talks today, be the absolute dumbest person in the room. No, it's okay. So thank you for bringing me in. This has been really cool to just sit and listen to all the talks. This talk is a little bit different. I don't have a PowerPoint because I don't have a lot of cool technical stuff to show you. This is actually a story that turns into an idea that then turns into a technique and kind of a nerdy obsession with what I am trying to do very well, hopefully. How I got into motion capture was in 2007. I was standing on a sand stage in Ohio doing an outdoor drama, riding horses, fighting with swords. I'm a certified stage combat instructor and fight director. And I was standing on stage, and my phone rang, and it was a number from New York, and it was a guy named Chuck Mangelli. And he said in a deep New York accent, he said, "Hey, are you available next week?" And I was like, maybe. And I turned to my director, I was like, they want to bring me to New York to do motion capture for a video game. Can I go? And he was like, yeah, we got an understudy, you go. So I got on a 6 a.m. flight that next morning, and I flew to New York for the first time, and I got in a taxi cab, and I drove out to Long Island, and I got out of the car, and they put me in a suit, and they put markers all over me, and I walked into the studio, and my friend who had recommended me to Tim, because Tim was the first person who hired me, so thank you, brother. I walked up to my friend in the volume, and I said, dude, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And he goes, don't worry, nobody does. He's like, just listen, pay attention, and just do you. And so I did. I took his advice. I went out there. I did me. I got to play this character named Johnny Gat, which was super cool. I got to kind of get into what motion capture was. And then when Saints Row 2 came out, I played the game, and I was super pissed because I could see myself on screen. And I thought, that can't be right. It can't be me. It's got to be him. How the hell do I do this? And so then that kind of started the obsession. Coming back around, going into Saints Row 3 with Zach Lowry, who brought me in and started to make me play more characters. We got into this thing, we called it the look, where we would have someone in the studio, and they wouldn't be able to do what he wanted them to do, and he'd go, and he'd look at me, and I'd go, yeah. And I knew that I was going to be doing that tomorrow. And so I realized that I could make myself more useful and more effective and more beneficial to the process if I could kind of become all of these people that I was trying to be. And what I realized is doing motion capture performance, I can be whoever I can truthfully move like. It doesn't matter how tall I am, how much I weigh, what ethnicity I am. I can play zombies, I can play aliens, I can play monsters, I can play regular people, I can play gangsters, I can play whoever I can truthfully become within my own body. And what I realized was no one is teaching actors how to do this style of acting, and that's what it is. It is a style of acting. I went to school. I got a bachelor's degree in theater with an emphasis in acting. I then went on to get a master's degree with an emphasis in stage combat and movement performance, and they taught me how to act on film, and they taught me how to act on stage. And what I see is typically motion capture performers coming in, doing their first few jobs. That's what they're doing. They're just acting for the camera. And that's really not what we're supposed to be doing. So me, being the academic nerd that I am when it comes to performance, I said, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to sit down and try and figure out technique, because what we need as a performer is a base, a structure to work within, so that we can then be truthful and live within the moment we're supposed to be portraying. So, actors are not trained to work in this industry. How do we train them to work in this industry? And I started to sit down and think about what motion capture performance really is. And what I realized is I am puppeteering a rig of a character. I have to become that character. Now, how do I do that? I have to find a natural state in myself that matches up with the natural state of who that character is physically. And I started to figure this process out, and I started to think, well, what do I really need? I need as much prep work as I can possibly get. Anything that can tell me personality, movement style, any type of particular I can get. So I started looking at whether or not I could get any type of concept art before a shoot. And the guys at Volition would send me pictures and go, this is what he looks like. And I'd talk on the phone with animation leads, and Zach would say, yeah, he's kind of like this, and he's like this character. And when we were developing him, we kind of thought that he was like a mix of these two people and like references that I could go off of. So once I have my prep work and I start to think about who that character is, the first thing I have to find is what I call the base. And what that really is the foot placement of where that character lives in their natural state. In acting, we call it neutral body, how we all stand when we're not doing anything. I think in animation, you guys call it maybe an idle. Is that what it is? Yeah, so an idle. We call it neutral body. So I want to find neutral body, and I started to realize that foot placement directly affects our center of gravity as human beings. How I carry my body has a lot to do with my foot placement and how I find my base. Whether I tilt onto one hip, whether or not I'm splay-footed because I might be a little bit overweight and I want to relieve pressure on the back, or if I'm athletic, I may be a little bit more pigeon-toed and that tilts me a little bit forward, moves my center of gravity up into my chest. So once we find center of gravity, I want to find balance with center. And this is a really difficult thing for actors to find because it's not how we naturally move in everyday life. So you're told in the studio, yeah, move naturally, move naturally, move naturally. And then we move naturally and we cross our feet over and we screw up walks and turns right to left. And we can't do these very simple things that we do in regular life because it's not exactly what the animators need to create the character. So I thought, well, what's the problem? Because I sat in a studio and I watched all of my friends who I work with try and turn left. And we kept screwing it up. No one could turn left. We kept falling, crossing our feet, and it was like, no, you need to turn left and open up your hip. And it was like, okay, how do we do this? And I started watching and I realized that when we walk, we fall forward and we catch ourselves. It's a controlled fall. But if I'm going to turn like that, I can't do a controlled fall. I must control my center. I must keep my center. So essentially, I have to create an axis that goes down through my center line and splits my base so that my feet are always evenly distributing weight as I walk. And that's a very small, kind of minute thing that probably doesn't show up anywhere, but it allows me to move in any direction possible at any time. So I found base and I found balance. Once I find base and balance, I allow myself to develop a character out through the extremities. How does he or she hold their head, their arms, chest, shoulders, all the way out to finger articulation, even if that's not even being captured. I want to have it as part of my performance so that it's fully immersive. So, breathe life into the character. I want to find natural structure. Going back. We go into Saints Row 3, Zach starts throwing more characters at me. I'm thinking about Saints Row 2, where I watched myself in a game, and it irritated me. So I start to develop this technique, and I start to play different characters, and I realized that I was onto something, because I could switch. And you start getting thrown into scenes, and they go, well, we're going to do one pass, and you're going to play this character, and then we'll do another pass, and you'll play this character. And they're actually going to interact at one point, but we'll handle that. And we start working through different scenes, and I'm more and more characters as we go through Saints Row 3 and Saints Row 4. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, there's legs to this. It's working. But I'm still not satisfied, right? So, we move into Saints Row 4, then we go into Get Out of Hell, and I finally get to put this to work the way I think that it can kind of culminate it into one single scene. And it was a scene where we had a fight, and it was 6 demons and Johnny Gat, and I walk into the studio, and it's just me in the studio, and I'm like, what are we doing? And he's like, oh, you're playing everybody. Okay, Yeah, tight budget. You're playing everybody. And so we developed this fight, choreographed the fight. I'm swinging through air. Here's where the demon's going to be, backhand. Here's where the demon's going to be, throw a kick. And we do all this choreography, and then I go through, and they marked on the floor where I got hit, and they put a crash pad down, and I'd come in and I'd do all the reactions, just one after another, each character being a different person. And then I see the final product that they stitched together, and I'm fighting 6 different versions of me, which for an actor is quite the ego trip, to be able to fight 6 versions of yourself. But I still go back to the technique. I need to become better at becoming other people. So I start to get more immersed into the technique of motion capture, and what I realized later on as we move into Agents of Mayhem is if I have eyes on the front of my face, I'm a hunter. So that's where my movement, my instinct to move starts, is the eyes. But the movement of the body generates from the base through the extremities. So I start to develop characters, and all the movement comes from the feet out through the body. So if I need to lift a shoulder more, it's not about lifting the shoulder more, it's about finding the instinct in the body and bringing enough energy through the shoulder so that we get the right movement. And I start to look into it deeper and deeper, and we move into Agents of Mayhem, and as we start working, all of these characters have distinct personalities, weapon styles, distinct movement, and I'm playing more and more every time I go to the studio. Oh, you're going to play this guy now, you're going to play that guy now, you're going to play this guy now, and I know that these characters are actually playable, so they're on screen way more than like a boss or a non-playable character that's a henchman that you're going to kill right away, that you're catching like a couple of motions on. So then I get in my head and I'm like, okay, I need to do more, I need to do more. I start to find these characters' personalities within the movement. Find the feet, find the center, find the base, and then I find the character. I'm working off the voiceover, that adds to it. So I have these little fidgets that I find in the voice that allows me to build on that character. So the whole point of me being here is to really ask a question and be here to talk to a lot of you about the problems that you have with performance. What are the hang-ups and what are the things that you're not finding? Because as actors, we're still trying to figure out what this is. And I think I have a good idea of what it's supposed to be, but it's a difficult thing because I'm trying to create the base of what this is supposed to be without any real knowledge of the other side of it. I've realized through conversations with friends of mine who are animators that animators and actors are very much on 2 different sides of the same coin, where we're trying to breathe life and create these characters and be truthful to these characters. But sometimes our communication doesn't really link up, and we need to find a way to better communicate with one another in the space and before we get in the space so that we can become an asset to the project, more of an asset to the project. I believe that creative collaboration is one of the greatest parts of my work, is I get to work with other people who do wonderful art, and I get to add my art to it and create something that is better and complete. We come together and create something together. And without communication, I'm never going to find that. We're never going to find that. So basically, that is my process for motion capture performance. That's where I am at this point. I'm playing, Mike, how many characters? 20 different characters on Agents of Mayhem that range from playable characters to bosses. It's pretty much every male character on the game, and constantly trying to figure out how to make them more unique and more truthful to themselves. Trying to find that base so that I can live on my instincts as an actor. I think a lot of people get into motion capture and they get overwhelmed by the kind of otherworldliness of what it is compared to where we normally perform. And they get freaked out and then they start to overthink. And as I teach, I tell actors all the time, stay out of your head. Once we are aware of what our instinct is, it ceases to be an instinct. And so then our performance seems forced and it seems staged. And you see falseness within the performance. And I'm sure you guys who have worked with motion capture actors have seen that before, where the performance doesn't seem natural, it doesn't seem real or truthful. And typically it's because the actor is overthinking what they're trying to do. But the only way to not overthink it is to have natural structure in the character, a structure that lives truthfully on my body, but is truthful to who that character is physically. And once you find that, then you can kind of relax. And you get into that character, and then you're not you anymore, you're them. And you move like them, and you walk like them, and you are able to add 300 pounds of weight to your body. Make yourself seem like you're maybe 3 feet taller than you actually are. But it's a process, and it's work that the actors need to be informed of. And I think that we can get better performances out of motion capture. Because, again, we've never been trained to do this, and we're trying to figure it out as we go along. So, yeah, that's basically what I've got. I wanted to leave time for questions, and not just questions, but for me, because this is a process that is very new and I'm trying to figure it out, I'd really like to hear problems that you've had, hang-ups that you have, things that have not worked when you're in the motion capture studio with actors, so that I have a sense of where I need to go with it. I travel all over the country and I do stage combat workshops, and they always want me to teach motion capture performance classes. And I want to be able to give young actors who are in college who want to come into this business and work with you guys on these games, I want them to understand what's going to be expected of them. And I want them to not be blindsided and not walk into a studio and go, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and have that terrifying moment where the door opens and you're afraid it might shut immediately. So I'm very interested if there are any questions, anything, any information that you can give me, anything that you have a question about that I might be able to clear up from the actor's mentality, because we are not, we have a different way of thinking. So the microphones are open if you have any questions, anything.
Hello, I'm actually very curious and I've been trying to visualize. Can you transform into some distinct characters and move and talk us through how you're doing that right now?
Yeah, like right now?
Yeah.
Well, okay, I'll start out with Gat, because he's kind of probably the most famous character that I've played. The big thing that got with me about Gat was when I saw the first design, the first picture of him, when Tim showed me the first picture, it was like, this is the guy you're gonna play. He had this fleur-de-lis tattoo on his neck. And so when I kind of found him, I found him with this like tilt to his head, because I thought if someone has a tattoo on their neck, then they're gonna wanna show that off, so that's kind of the focal point of who they are. And then when I heard Daniel Day Kim's voiceover, he does these really amazing he has this crazy cool speech pattern and these little inhalations, and so I started to get all these like little shoulder shrugs and this little head nod here. And he always had this kind of like aggressive energy that felt like it was just gonna pop out at you at any time. And I thought that was very important, because he kills like millions of people in the world that he's in, and I thought he should always feel a little unstable, but in a really cool way. And so it started with just that tilt to the head, and finding this structure and being able to balance that structure, and then you could kind of play off of that. And I could play off of Daniel's voiceover, which was, when you have a good voiceover actor and you've got that voiceover and you can play off of it and let the voice kind of move the body, it's an absolute luxury to have that. So voiceover actors are like, I love it when I have the performance to work on in the studio. But I hope that helped. Yeah?
Hey, sorry. So if if when you're on a mocap stage, if you could grab the animator or director by the shoulders and shake them and tell them like one thing about how they are failing to direct you, what would that one thing be?
Tell me what you want. For real, it's something I had to go through. Tim and Ev, our cinematics director, Ev has a tell. When he wants something and he isn't getting it, he does this. And I picked up on it. So every time he does this, I go, Ev, what do you want? Just tell me what you want. Because we want to do what you want. But I feel like there's a mindset of, yeah, that's fine, we'll fix the rest of it later. And I personally don't want that to be the case. I want to give you as much as I possibly can as an actor so that you have less work to do, so that you have a stronger base to start with, because it's never my performance on the game, ever. It's always added and pulled and stretched and moved and exaggerated in ways to make me look way cooler than I ever could in real life. But the more I can give you to start out with, I think the better the end product can be. So the big thing is tell me what you want and I will do everything I can to make it happen. And if I can't make it happen, then, you know, that's where we are, yeah? Yes?
I just had a question if you've ever had to play a character so far different from yourself, like a humanoid alien or something similar, and do you go about doing anything different to get into that role?
Yeah, yes, aliens and zombies and all sorts of crazy things that I've played before. I did Zinyak on Saints Row 4, and I just tried. What I started to understand about characters that were larger than me is that as long as they're proportional, they're not larger than me, because I can make myself appear as large as I need to be in that rig. So if I can move the rig in a truthful way, then I'm as heavy as I need to be for that character. And most of the time, larger characters or kind of otherworldly characters, things that are not quite the same as my structure, it's about just kind of understanding why they need to move the way they move. And again, I find that from the base normally. If I can find the right foot placement, it's weird, I've become obsessed with how people walk. My wife gets mad at me and she's like, stop looking at people's feet. But it's because I realized that the way people use their feet really affects the rest of their body. And it all kind of starts from there. So if I can find that, I'm typically in a good spot.
Quick follow-up, is bigger or smaller characters harder to play or the same for you?
No, they're the same. As long as I can find the structure, man, it's like...
Thank you.
No problem, thank you.
Hi, so my question is about, you mentioned how you had to modify the way you walk with your center of gravity so that you could do the turns without having problems, etc.
Yes.
But you also mentioned how you had your background in the fight career. So there's some athletic background you have.
Yes.
And now you want to shoot a fight scene. You're trying to adjust that sports knowledge, so to speak, to a mocap performance. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in how you do that. Like, is there a particular process or any tips you have for, like, you know how to play basketball and then you want to make a mocap of you making a shot. Like, how do you adjust that?
Well, it's funny because the fight stuff, it's actually how we move when we create combat, is how I'm walking in a mocap studio and keeping my center line. We talk about grounding and centering the body when we fight, because if I'm in a fight, I have to be able to move any direction at the drop of a dime, right? Or I'll die, yeah? I got to get out of the way of the sword. So tilting my weight all onto one foot, it really puts me at a disadvantage if I'm in physical altercation. So you're constantly trying to find balance. So what I did was, when I realized that I already had that training, I just applied it to everyday movement so that I could control the movement better but not look like I was controlling the movement. With acting, we want the technique to disappear. If you see the technique, we're screwed, because then it looks false. But if I can make the technique disappear, let the technique be the base and move naturally within the technique in natural structure. Natural structure meaning I don't want to hold a character in my muscles. If I hold a character in my muscles, it's very hard to find that character, because if my muscles are sore, or I haven't worked out as much or I've worked out too much, it's going to be a little different. But if I can find character in my natural structure of my body and allow myself to find how the arms hang, then I can play from natural structure as opposed to unnatural structure. But the fighting stuff really actually helped me. Was that?
Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes.
So sometimes we have to make animations that are going to be applied and used on just tons and tons of different characters as evenly. Have you ever had to record animations that are supposed to be generic?
Generic.
And when you do, like, how do you, since you don't have a one character to find, how do you go about that?
Well, it's actually pretty easy. Normally, I have references that I use. If it's like a general male character, like an everyday male character, I'll just use myself. I'm 5'10", I weigh about 180 pounds. I'm a white male in my 30s. I just use myself. And then I have other friends. If it's an athletic male, I have friends who are very athletic and very small, and for me, it's about prep work. And I'm constantly watching the way people move and just putting it in the bank and watching people's feet. And luckily, I teach movement, so I'm constantly watching people develop performance movement. And that helps tremendously too. But with generic stuff, it's like I find a character that I consider kind of generic, and I go from there.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you had talked about instances where vocal delivery informs your performance.
Yes.
And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the interaction between two performances that go into making one character. And are there any instances where your physical performance is informing the vocal performance, or where you wish that were the case?
I can't speak on whether or not the physical performance changes the vocal performance, because I've never been on the other side of that. But I know that as an actor, we learn voice and body is connected. Voice drives the body, and the body drives the voice, and it's like this circle. So the way someone speaks is going to affect the way they move, and the way they move actually affects the way they speak. If you've ever seen hip-hop artists and the way they move their body to get a certain sound to come out of their voice, it's kind of a circle, and it's always connected. So yeah, I hope that answered some of your question. That's the last question over here, because I'm about to wrap up.
Sure. So just to elaborate on what you were saying about, obviously, the obvious, tell me what you need, is there anything beforehand, or what are the kind of the key clear bits of information you want about a character before and during the shoot?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and I know that we live in a world where everything tries to get leaked on the internet, so everybody is very secure about the information that they give out. But anything that I can get that can tell me who that character is, tendencies, weapon styles, fighting styles, what characters I've already played that they interact with, and how they interact with them within the story will help me kind of develop a personality. And then I can start to play with who that person is. Because I'm doing movement, but I hear the voice, I understand the personality, and so therefore I'm trying to create the full character, even though all that's being captured is the movement. So I make noise in the space, I try and vocalize, because if I can vocalize, then it'll help me move a little bit more natural and more realistic and get a better shot. So yeah, really anything, any information that the actor can get can help them just be more informed. Because if they're not informed, then they're trying to catch up in the space, and a lot of people won't. They'll just check out and they'll go, oh, okay, I'll do what they say, and then I'll go home. And I personally want more than that. I want the performance to mean more. I want the project to be good, and I want to be a healthy part of the process. So any information, any prep information really, really helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm done. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to come into your community and talk. This has been wonderful. Thank you.